To unpack this a bit more further for us, we're now joined by Professor Erwin Schwella, political analyst and Dean of the School of Social Innovation at Hugenote College. And he joins us via our video link. Professor, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Perhaps to start off here, what is your reaction to the latest ruling? Of course, it's saying that the ANC needs to hand over these records to the Democratic Alliance.
I am very convinced that this is a good indication of how the rule of law in a country where we have a constitution and a constitutional court as the final court in constitutional matters can then confirm that there is just no ways that you can hide public records or records with an impact on public service as momentous as these ones, as influential as these ones, that you can hide them from the public. The question arises, why do the ANC government do not want to share these records with us? Obviously, if you don't share them, then you've got something to hide. And what is hidden here is basic to professional public service. Professional public service requires that professional officials be appointed on the basis of merit, not loyal cadres. I have taught over many years, many people of all the South African groups. And I have come across a huge amount of very talented people across those groups. But many of them don't get jobs, irrespective of which group they are in, because they are not loyal cadres. What are the consequences? The consequences are that sweets run in the streets. Trains do not depart from stations. The post office is run down. There is virtually very little clean water to drink. We have continuous load shedding. That is those are the consequences of cadre deployment, and we need to know. We've got a right to know, and we should know, so that we can act also as the electorate, but also as activists.
And I want to stick to that, the electorate. I mean, we find ourselves during an election year in this country, and one would say that the person who headed the cadre deployment policy or committee at the time was indeed the current president of the ANC and the current president of the country, President Cyril Ramaphosa. How incriminating will these records be, especially for a president who's seeking a second term in this year's elections?
Well, let's just assume that it will be an indication of how this process was abused in many ways to promote loyal cadres in the judiciary, even. And that is shocking, because the judiciary should be independent. In all of the public service, both at municipal governance tier, provincial governance tier, sphere, and central government sphere. Also in all of the state-owned enterprises. And therefore, it will be, if it is proven, obviously we have not seen the documentation yet. I'm somewhat concerned that, a mysterious flood or fire might destroy them still. However, if we see them, there will be indications in minutes of how this whole process was used in order to not promote the interests of the public in service delivery, but to promote the interests of the party. And another consequence of that is you create these loyal cadres who are often not competent. They then become easy to manipulate because they know they're not competent. And in that way, they become easy to manipulate. So you build in a continuous dynamic of corrupt activities. So in a particular situation such as this, we need to see it, and I think it's going to be a huge embarrassment for the president, who was the chair of the Cadre Deployment Committee when he was the deputy president during this period for which this court ruling now is valid.
And Professor, coming to the actual records, and if I would jog my memory a bit, while I was covering the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, I remember then Justice Zondo slating the ANC and slating President Cyril Ramaphosa when he said, well, actually, We did not take any minutes of these meetings which took place when it comes to how certain cadres were deployed. Would you say that these records even exist because of what we've been told in the past, that there were no minutes being recorded?
Well, in many ways, when you do forensic investigations, and this in some ways might link into something which is analogous to a forensic investigation, there's always a trace. There's a trace in WhatsApps. There are traces in emails. I'm quite sure there will be damage control from the side of the ANC government. They will not want to divulge this. They've already, in all of these instances, shown that they will fight to the last hilt the idea that they must disclose these records. So they know it's going to be embarrassing. And if it's not available, I would be very surprised, because it's not usual that public bureaucracies are actually without minutes. And that might be, if it's the case, another case illustrating the terrible state of our public service due to cadre deployment.
And Professor, has this ever happened before, where a political party has been, or rather a ruling political party was requested by the courts to hand over their very crucial documents within their political party to an opposition political party in a country?
Well, I'm not aware of any such case, but our case is very unique, because there are not many cases of cadre deployment, at least not in rule of law constitutional states. And our justices in the Constitutional Court says you have to hand this over, because political parties are also role players in the constitutional dynamic. A political party is actually a constitutional element. So the constitutional element then requires the public to know. You cannot keep these things hidden. You cannot, at the disadvantage of the public, where services deteriorate, where everything does not work anymore. You cannot keep it away from the public, and that was what the ANC government intended to do.
And do you think that, come Friday, once the DA hopefully obtains these documents and they are handed over to the Democratic Alliance in an election year, one would even ask that, can they even be used as some sort of political tool, especially during a time where most political parties in this country are campaigning for the elections?
Of course they will be used as a political tool. That is the nature of contested politics. However, we should also realize that the DA didn't bring this particular application in an election year. They brought it at least 4 or 5 years ago. I was personally involved in a submission to the Parliamentary Commission on the Public Service on cadre deployment. And in all of these cases, they were ignored. So the fact that the ANC government ignored them might have created a bigger embarrassment and a bigger political benefit for the DA, but that is the way it is. If you want to obfuscate things and hide things, then you have to suffer the consequences.
And in closing, how harmful has cadre deployment been, especially in the running of this country?
Well, I would like to ask the viewers whether they know of some successful state-owned enterprises, including South African Airways, the Post Office, the Eskom. Do they find that they are well served by the Department of Home Affairs? Are they well served by their municipalities? Are they actually in a situation where they are direly having a battle to just get drinking water? That, to a certain extent, is all the consequences of cadre deployment, because it corrupts the whole system endemically.
Professor, thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure talking to you on the late edition. That is Professor Erwin Schwella, political analyst and Dean of the School of Social Innovation at Hugenote College.